Welcome to this post-workout training session. Just finished a 3 hours and 45 minutes. It is evening, 9 past 9:30 in the p.m. and I was on a march on a stormy day and windy and rainy and stormy and lightning and heard about four thunders. Now we're gonna put a late cup of coffee on the Thursday, 4th of September. We're gonna just discuss geopolitics. Just gonna pour this cup of coffee and say my gratitude. Although financially stressed, I gotta be grateful, thankful for. I got coffee, I got a new table. I think I got it last September or October or September, so almost a year in this October probably when I had it. It's got a red on it. It looks a bit circus-like, kind of like a circus. It has two halves, one bigger, one smaller, and providentially representing Canada, United States. As you know, I have been advocating and for many, many years now. Well, actually during COVID, my increased advocacy for further integration and now even furthermore the complete and full integration of Canada and the United States into the Imperial Democratic Republic via mass public-private partnership. And that aside, we're gonna maybe address the topic and overall topic of this integration proposal, the mass North American collective integrated proposal that of course is part of my dream, the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom. So if you're a first watcher here on my YouTube channel, you know that I'm a philosopher, an artist, an athlete, and mystic. I have a certain rock and roll spirituality, and I am a geopolitical theoretical analyst, theorist, and thinker and strategist. I develop strategies for North America, for NORAD, and furthermore for NATO. My hair is still a bit wet from the rain, so I look a little bit on that rock and roll style. And I sip a cup of coffee and I'm gonna say my gratitude again. Grateful, thankful my rent's paid. Paid my rent. It is September 4th, 2025. Paid my rent on the 1st. Paid my electricity bill on last Friday, just before. I think it was on the 30th of August. And still one more bill to pay, my phone bill. And maybe tomorrow, maybe Saturday, maybe Sunday, maybe in the next 2 weeks I'm gonna pay my phone bill. I'm just gonna hydrate a bit. I'm drinking instant coffee, and I bought it on a special. And instant is sometimes what you gotta get for that special in terms of the purchasing power when you're on a budget. And so it's still a good coffee, although it's instant. Always gotta rock and roll for the firefighters, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the truckers, the train conductors, those flipping some hamburgers, cheeseburgers, across the North American collective now, and all the 63, the 10, the 50, and the 3. And we're gonna go for a few minutes here, and it's gonna be probably just in English. Maybe we're gonna speak a little bit of that French, because I'm a Quebecer, Canadian, North American, and you gotta put in for the French language here in Quebec. One of the 63, always for the 10, the 50, and the 3 for the 63. And you're still independent artist, athlete, philosopher, and calling all willingly loving for to support the dream, the dancing goddess, and the dragon kingdom. I'm in a good mood, and I'm joyous. I'm just financially stressed, and I just finished a 3 hour and 45 minutes. If it wouldn't have rained, I would have probably done a 5 or 6 hours, but it was pouring, pouring, pouring. So I was already wet. So I said, rainy conditions. I'm gonna just short it down by an hour and a half, and I did a little bit less than 5. But yesterday, Wednesday, I did 5 more than 5, and Tuesday more than 5, and Monday more than 5. So tomorrow to add and balance up, we're gonna have to do a bit about around about 6, maybe 6 or 7 hours. And 2 weeks ago, I broke a record for the day Wednesday. I did on a Wednesday 2 weeks ago. It was 9 hours and 30 minutes. Not last Wednesday, not yesterday, not the Wednesday before, but another Wednesday. So always on my marching rock and roll and singing that cadence, always for those workers in all the collective. Even now, think about doing a little bit of meditation. It's gotta send some salutation to the truckers who carry that bacon, that cheese, that lettuce, and that romaine lettuce, or that butter, all the goods, the eggs that are now, of course, being delivered to the supermarkets across the North American Collective, across both Canada and the United States, and even if you're including the North American Collective, Mexico. I gotta be mindful and I gotta show off a little bit because it's gonna be my after the video treat. It was on special, $3.99 for five, a pack of five. I gave one to my anonymous friend, and I think I tried. I did try these before, but I think I tried beef instead of chicken, and now I'm gonna have chicken. During COVID, I tried them. Interestingly enough, it says that it's an export product. So these are fabricated and made for export. See there below it says export products. So they were reduced from $5.99 to $3.99. That's why I bought it. So I bought five for $3.99. That means that it's about, of course, the equivalent of 80 cents per pack, right? For soup. Because $3.99, that was four. There was no tax on these. And now it's interesting enough, it says that it's export products. So on some products you see that the country respectively who exports them makes them only for export. See here, in both French and English, it says export product. It says export product. They are written there, see? Export product, and the country of origin, interestingly enough, is Indonesia. It says it's manufactured by Indo Food CPB Success Makmurtak, Jakarta, Indonesia. Jakarta is, of course, a huge city, the capital of Indonesia. See there? So they're from Indonesia, and interestingly enough, Indonesia is the fourth most populated country in the world. Right now, India is first, China is second. India overtook China this year, and now United States is third, and fourth is actually Indonesia, the fourth most populated. So Indonesia is the top five most populated countries in the world. Indonesia. It's many islands in Asia, and they constitute a nation state, a say state. It was under French rule before in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and that those noodles are product of Indonesia. And it's interesting because there had some major turbulence and even to the point of some violence and outright riots in Indonesia. And I was following because, of course, I'm an independent geopolitical theoretical analyst and theorist, and geopolitics is my special interest. I have this neurological, I live with a neurological mental divergent condition called Asperger's. And so, of course, I have these special interests. And I'm just going to go about 4 minutes on Asperger's, not more. I'm part of those, half of Aspies are officially undiagnosed. And myself, I've been diagnosed independently by several citizens for about 9 years now, 8, 9 years now, by fellow citizens and acquaintances and friends who have experience in the healthcare system and have worked with people with autism, with Asperger's, and which myself, of course, I'm one of those, because only half of the population of Aspies, people who live with Asperger's, which is not a disease, the neurological mental divergent condition, and of course, half only are diagnosed officially, and I'm part of the half who are unofficially diagnosed, but I've been diagnosed by several citizens who have experience with, with Asperger's and in the healthcare system, in the healthcare system here in Canada. So the population who was diagnosed with Asperger's is a tiny small fraction of the population, is about 0.44%. The total population of Aspies thus, if we were to double, because only 50% are diagnosed, it's about 0.88%. So even then, it's about less than 1%. Less than 1% of the population of the world. So it's not that common. A lot of people don't even know what it is. Where we have to draw the line and have to state clearly that it's not having Asperger's, being an Aspie is not negative or evil or bad or malicious. It's not evil, bad, negative, or malicious. That's where we have to draw the line on the condition, because it's not a disease either. It's not something which you can medicate. I have to always work on my characteristics. We have our difficulties, and myself, I don't require much supports in social matters. Some Aspies require more support in socializing and the way social, we're not good with social norms, unwritten social rules and etiquette, and those things can be more difficult for Aspies, and we certainly can have certain characteristics and traits and how we live our daily lives, which might seem odd and strange and bizarre and awkward and weird, outright weird. However, we also have paradoxically strengths, and those strengths manifest themselves usually relative and in those special interests, because Aspies, people with Asperger's like myself, and I give a shout out to my anonymous friend who gifted me two books on autism with several chapters related just to Asperger's, because they merged with autism and they merged in 2013, 2014. And of course, it is the dynamics that of this merger that, of course, it's part of the autism spectrum now. But one book in particular, which was loaned because it was a library loan, which I gotta mention, and which taught me a lot about how my vulnerabilities and how to continue to build bridges, because we have to build bridges with you, the 99%, and myself as an aspect. I don't have antagonistic, resentful feelings, hostile feelings towards neurotypicals. It's just we have to build bridges, and those bridges sometimes are small, medium, large, or extra large. I just say when you order a cup of coffee or fries, you order small size, medium size, large size, or extra large. Within those four categories, there can be subcategories within those four categories of sizes of bridges, which we got to build, and it takes a to the tango, it takes a mutual effort, a mutual understanding, and it's more about understanding and comprehension, and how, of course, we can build these bridges and to the benefit of all, not just ourselves as individual citizens, myself living with being an ASPE, part of the collective community of neurodivergence known as people who live with Asperger's, Aspies, but also part of the greater full total community of the North American civilizational complex, of which we are now with Canada and United States. We're about close to 400 million together, right? And out of those 400 million, less than 1% have Asperger's. And thus we have to build bridges continuously, and then it's a continuous effort of reciprocity. And certainly we have our weaknesses, and one book which I got to thank my anonymous friend for loaning four times from the library is called Appreciating Asperger's Syndrome. I do encourage all to read, and I certainly learned a lot about myself and how I can be perceived, and how fellow other aspects can be perceived, and how these bridges need to be built with an effort of managing certain characteristics or traits which can make us lose employment, because that's a big problem for Aspies, and it's the unemployment rate is totally unacceptable for Aspie, stands at 80%. So myself, I had many jobs, but I lost them, and not a lot of friends. We don't have a lot of friends, and my solution is friends with benefits only, 18 plus, black or white or black. I am also part of the LGBTQ community. I'm androgynous, pansexual, so don't waste my time. I won't waste yours. And or pledge allegiance, legions to our family, support the dream, Rainbow Dragon, Adrian Hanna, Dragon's Dream, the Dancing Goddess, and the Dragon Kingdom. And depression and suicidal rates are part of what I lived myself for a few years, and I'm celebrating 8 years since I crossed Canada coast to coast, and that event made me completely change my whole life. And I moved here. I thought it was 2016, but it's 2015. So I've been living here for 10 years. I really came here with nothing. I came here with nothing. I don't even think I even have any clothes or anything that I had from my old place. It was an old moldy place, nothing that I want to go back to, like underground basement, and I didn't even have a bathtub. I'm grateful for having a bathtub now, and gotta clean it, scrub it more often, I guess. And I do that rock and roll, and of course it's something that I gotta be prudent about. And I have these special interests, which are the Holy Trinity: rock and roll, sports and fitness. Dancing is my favorite sport, although I like gridiron, North American football, boxing, gymnastics, and all sports and fitness. But dancing is my favorite sport, and rock and roll. So that's my trinity. And geopolitics, I excel to the point of fact that now I'm not gonna spend much time discussing Asperger's, but it's important to note because it contributes to the paradox of me having predicted what's happening now geopolitically. So Aspies, we have special interests, and those special interests were super focused, super intense, super concentrated, and super dedicated. And we have these routines, ritual like routines, and which are ritualistic like routines on a daily basis. I mean, for years and years and years, is workout, training, fitness, and marching, and fitness, and dancing, and doing geopolitical analysis and theorizing. And pretty much my life recommences, begins when I moved here. I guess is my fourth re-beginning, rebirth, fourth in the past 11 years. As far as my memory goes back prior to 2014 spring, about March, April 2014. I have trouble remembering my life before like February, March 2014. Well, spring 2014. Before that, I have kind of like a blackouts or retrograde amnesia of memory. It's hard for me to um, remember my life prior to that. So I live with my scars, my aspiness, and I guess this whole the survival of being depressed and suicidal. And what got me out of depression and suicidal was crossing Canada. So celebrating 8 years, I got the tickets. In 2017, I crossed Canada coast to coast. I established a strong spirit core with my fellow Canadians. So ever since I started working out, training, exercising, I lost about 80 to between 80 between minimum 80 pounds and maximum of 93 pounds, because I created my own workout training program system, which is an efficient, effective program system, which I created and I take great pride in. So I'm going to wrap it up on that. I'm going to finish with Asperger's, and I'm going to encourage you all to work out, train, exercise. I'm going to say my gratitude again, and we're going to hit it hard in geopolitics. Grateful, thankful, my rent's paid, although financially stressed. Am rich in trillions of kisses. I got trillions of kisses. Credit from the Forgotten Goddess and the Temple of the Forgotten Goddess, 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 Goddess I will to build. She doesn't need me to build. Androgynous pansexual mystic artist, athlete, philosopher to build her temples, because she's got the pyramids and I'm just a piece of dust, lusting us nonetheless. But it's of course something which I have to of course meditate upon. That's my will, parallel to building the Imperial People's Coliseum, the four buildings. And on the Canadian US border, me and Donald Trump were gonna fight, because it's Dragon versus Trump since 2018, when Donald Trump made the geopolitical mistake to impose tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. And the House of the Dragon, scarlet, crimson and scarlet are shades of red. The pyramid. Bury me with Papa Crowley, one third of me in New Jersey, one third of me in the city of the pyramids, and one third of me in the on top of the Mount Royal, or switch me every 11 years from Mount Royal to the pyramids to Hampton, New Jersey, where Alistair Crowley, per the rebels, buried his ashes. Leave the baggage at the door. We're gonna hit it hard in geopolitics. It's my special interest. I am not only an artist, an athlete, a philosopher, but an independent geopolitical theoretical analyst, thinker, theorist, and strategies, developing strategies for NORAD, NATO, the North American Collective. Much of my work even predates 2017, but since I spent a few years being depressed and suicidal right here, and crossing Canada made me, my work kind of dates to 2017 summer, post cross traversing Canada coast to coast, which was an event that completely changed my life. So geopolitics of today, I'm gonna commence with the fact of which I have proof for. I predicted what's happening now back in 2019, in October 17th. I posted the first video with my conclusion that humanity is again set towards an international conflagration, and another, in other words, a World War III. So I predicted what's happening now in a general manner, not in a very detailed manner, but in a general manner. The course of the world has been parallel to my prediction of 2019, which I had predicted that in the future there will be another major international conflagration, also known as a world war or a World War III. But to say World War III, because in theory we had, in the 20th century we had World War One and World War Two, but there were other wars which kind of could be considered world wars. So that's a matter for historians, geopoliticians, but I'm not gonna argue. If you want to say World War III, that's fine. Nonetheless, I predicted that a major geopolitical shift and international conflagration is coming, in the great storm, if you will, storm of the century in many ways, which we are kind of witnessing now. My analysis was intellectual, academic, quaterocratic, and more historical. And I specialize in the 20th century, and of course on a day-to-day basis, because sometimes I spend hours just watching the news on the left, on the right, from Canada, Quebec, United States, Montreal, here in Hawk Island, HAWK, Island of the Hawk, the United States, and Europe, and Mexico, and from Asia. And I watch news outlets such as Vion, World is One, which is India based, and to get a feel of the external from outside of the NATO sphere or North American collective sphere, to get an idea of how news and geopolitical events are presented, to make a more in-depth analysis, because geopolitics is of course international, global, universal in scope. Of course, the definition of geopolitics is quite diverse, and just to summarize, that is basically the study of the interplay of politics and geography. Geography comes from the word geopolitikos, geography, a place, a region, and polity from nation states as they were in ancient Greece, and comes from the Greek word, the word geopolitics, and it encompasses history, statistics, events. Of course, events are always unfolding, even now, events, because we have time zones. Keep in mind that we have time zones. In Europe, it's in the morning, and of course, in Asia, it's day now. In Asia, it's in China, Japan, and Indonesia, where I'm gonna eat those noodles. They're morning time now. They're in the morning, so they're conducting business, they're conducting geopolitical maneuvering, they're conducting policies, they're conducting government, they're conducting business, they're working, workers in Japan, Korea's, the North Korea, South Korea. For all we know, at this moment in time, China might invade Taiwan, which is known as the ROC, the Republic of China. And my prediction was that one of the main important pillars of my conclusion back in 2019, and again I have the videos because I have proof, and consequently I also created a workout training program system designed to go with such a scenario where the workouts, where people, citizens, will need to get fit, and fitness will be part of the mobilization strategy. And we need, of course, to mass finance fitness. As I've discussed in my past videos, you can get acquainted with much of my philosophies, initiatives, and geopolitical strategies, such as the bipolar geopolitical strategy for total BDD, benevolent dominance and dominion of the world, by the fusion of Canada and United States into the 63 Imperial Perpetual Republican Union of the 63. And it's not one state, of course. It's going to be, we're going to add 13 new states, and we're complex is going to be 13 new states, just like providentially, just like the original 13 of 1776. And I'm a mystic, and I was born in the United States in past lives, and once as a woman, twice as a man, served in the same United States Armed Forces 156 years apart. And whenever I hear U.S. military related, such as the, of course, Marines or National Guard, I always sing a cadence, because I was served in the United States Armed Forces in two different wars. The wars were 156 years apart. And if you believe in reincarnation, just read George Patton's Through a Glass Darkly, one of my poems, which one of my favorite poems, written by George Patton, the general of the U.S. Army, Third Army, and of course fought in the Second World War. George Patton, and he wrote a poem called Through a Glass Darkly, which is one of my favorites, but he neglected and perhaps didn't get the proper visions that he was also a woman, as in a past life, previous incarnation, I was a man, a woman, a woman, a man, a woman, a man. That's why you get that 50-50 now, half half. And and something which you gotta get rock and rolling with. And he didn't mention that 2,600 years ago he was my wife, but I was his wife also in a past life. So once I was his wife, and then once he was my wife. So we balance, wife and husband, me and George Patton, great general. So that aside, mystic spirituality and belief in reincarnations aside, today on the 4th of September 2025, somebody hoping making some good loving on my March, 3 hours and 45 minutes this week. Already marched more than the generals of NATO combined during COVID. As during COVID, as I have this week. And I survived COVID, and I urge all to keep the protocols of hygiene, protocols that were developed during COVID. Myself, I changed so many times in the past 11 years, and I came here, I had really nothing, and I lost weight. I developed some strategies, and some strategies I cannot fully discuss. And when I discuss the bipolar strategy for the North, for the total BDD, benevolent dominance and dominion of the via the fusion of Canada and the United States into the Imperial Perpetual Republican Complex via public-private partnership, and especially the implementation of my DRT, Debt Fusion Theory, in concordium with the Citizen Integration Theory and the Democratic Fusion Theory, the DFT, that Trinity of theories, and parallel to the strategy called the total mobile defense theory, which I cannot overly discuss it much because it's binational security sensitive and part of the NATO complex security sensitive, the TMDT, total mobile defense theory, which when we add an S, it becomes a system. That means that my theory is put into implementation across Canada, United States, and furthermore NATO, because most of my theorizing and strategies and philosophies and framework for reference and for future works, such as the D.M.A.A, the direct military assistance and action, which I'm going to discuss now, or the direct military action or assistance, as is relevant as is not just a theory but is a working philosophy for potential future action or or refraining from future action, as it dictates the internal apparatus of the North Atlantic NATO military alliance, which is a defensive military alliance which has celebrated 75 years, and since 1949 it has been established. NATO, of which we are part of, Canada and the United States, and of course which Sweden just joined as the 32nd. And before October 7th, 2023, I was advocating for Israel and Mexico to consequently become the 32nd and 33rd members of NATO. But now we're going to have to finalize the conflicts, which they have, and finalize the situation with the cartels in Mexico, or the Gaza war, or Israel Hamas war, to reach a reconciliation or conclusion or finality, reach to some conclusions, and then we can furthermore integrate Mexico and potentially Israel to become part of NATO. For now, NATO expansion is several countries, of course, are in wait, but Sweden has joined last year. So Sweden is the newest one. Sweden is the newest one. So we have 32 member countries of NATO. Of course, we have internal security matters and domains, and the total mobile defense theory is mostly made for NORAD, for Canada, United States, the TMDT, Total Mobile Defense Theory, which I started developing after I traversed Canada coast to coast in 2017, summer 2017, when I crossed Canada coast to coast. That event completely changed my life, and I stopped being depressed, and I had a revelation. I've had an awakening. When I reached Banff, it was the mountains, it was like a paradise of mountains, and it was so beautiful crossing Canada Pacific to the Atlantic, and I established a strong esprit de corps with my fellow Canadians and my brothers and sisters in the 50 states, of which I got a lot of states to visit. I visited most in the past previous lives, incarnations, when I was born in the USA post 7076, three times, once as a woman, twice as a man. But in this life, I still got a lot to visit. Just in Canada, got a lot to visit in the 50 states, and of course, we got to implement the imperial tourist protocols for financing our brothers and sisters, as we're going to fuse together, and we're going to finance as a mass public-private partnership for the establishment of the esprit de corps, and for joy, 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 and pleasure and purpose of all the imperial citizens of the future imperial republic coming, let it be, where we're going to finance citizens to traverse all these great countries. Where we're going to every season every season we're going to establish 4 seasons. So every equinox of the 4 seasons, we're going to give 4 days. Everybody who's 16 plus, 16 of age, citizens of the empire, 4 days every season. Thus, 4 times 4, 16 days a year. All citizens were going to be credited where housing, transport, and food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 or 2. They have to eat 3 meals a day. You can do a home at 1 meal a day, but finance for the rehabilitation, the rejuvenation of our coming Imperial Republic Perpetual Union of the 63. Geopolitics of today, there's has been lots of events which have been happening in the past 4 days alone. From Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to today, Thursday. I have to, of course, state that the TMDT, Total Mobile Defense Theory, I cannot discuss it over much because I put it on YouTube and it's public and people have access to it all over the world, and it has to be discussed only with high ranking security officials and high-ranking members of NATO, such as David McGuinty and Pig Hegseth and Pam Bondi, and of course Tulsi Gabbard, and director of CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Services, and all members of the military defensive security apparatuses, high-ranking military security apparatus of NATO member countries, specifically Canada, United States, first and foremost, because it's mostly designed for Canada, United States. But the total mobile defense theory can be mm, expanded to the NATO military alliance for total security, total service, total defense, as my protocols are for the new 911 Dragon Army total security service and defense protocols and philosophies thereof, which I've discussed in the past and mentioned, and of course I will discuss in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. So we have to begin back in 2019 in October. So I predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration such as it is today. Now the nuclear use of nuclear weapons was more than 50%. So on the yes side, more than half. So 50 plus percent. And thus on the no side, 50 minus. However, the biological use of bioweapons, it was a two-thirds possibility in my World War III scenario. Two-thirds, 66.666%. Two-thirds, right? Interestingly enough, I believe that COVID was caused by snakes, but I cannot rule out another possibility since COVID, especially in the past year, in 2024 and this year, CIA and other institutions and intelligence services have concluded that COVID was actually made comes from a laboratory, so man-made biological, bacteriological disease or mutation of different diseases or what exactly it is. So the biological weapon question that COVID's origins and the purpose of COVID to be actually a bioweapon is still something which now is, at least in the past year, has been concluded that it's more possible that it is so. It has been engineered in the lab. Now I believe it was transmitted from snakes. There's the zoonotic theory that other it's believed that it was from bats or fowl or pig or pork and poultry or animals, from the animal kingdom to the human kingdom, right, to us humans. So from the animal kingdom, from the fauna to us Homo sapiens, to human beings. But I cannot rule out another possibility because I don't know for sure. What I do know for sure is that in 2019, October 17 to be specifically, I started posting my first video about the future, and I have proof because my videos are online from 2019, and of course I have proof of what I just said, that I have those videos which align themselves to just before COVID to the situation which has unfolded since COVID, which is the deterioration of relations between organizations and nation states and the growing unrest and growing open conflicts. And one of my main fundamental motives and reasons why I concluded that it's going to be an international conflagration was due to the fact that many nation state civilizational complexes did not fully resolve their conflicts from the 20th century. And if you look at the world, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, and what just happened about 4 months ago, Pakistan and India, and potentially Taiwan and China, they're unresolved conflicts from the 20th century, specifically the Cold War period. The Cold War lasted between 1947 and 1991. So between March 1947 and 1991. So almost 45 years. I put it from March 1947 to December 26, 1991, with Perestroika, Gorbachev ending the Soviet Union. So some historians, geopolitical theorists, analysts, and geopoliticians place it about even 45 or even 46 years. I say almost 45, but I'm not set in stone. It could be more than 45. I say around almost 45 years. Between 1947, March 1947, I placed the Cold War, till the end of December 1991. So almost 45 years in my book. Now, they can give a few months, a few weeks. That's not something which I am vehemently opposed to, more or less. A few weeks You want to say 46 years, you can say it more than 45, almost 45. I say almost 45 years between February, March 1947 and 26th of December 1991 when the official dissolution of the Soviet Union, USSR occurred. So, so that's what has been happening. These conflicts have reignited. And now we have, of course, we're at the level of we have seen in many ways, I had predicted these formations of geopolitical blocks, alliances. I predicted four main geopolitical regions with interactions between these regions, four main ones. So basically, the end of the hegemony, post Cold War period hegemony and domination of the United States as we had known it for several decades since the fall of the USSR, since the 90s, let's say 1991, December 1991, since the 90s till about the beginning of COVID or so, 2020. So for almost 3 decades, let's say since around 2020 or since the solidification of relations between Russia and China, forming the this by this binational military, political, financial, commercial alliance, which they solidified in the past 3 years and a half, especially since Russia declared their special military operation in Ukraine. Again, I'm not on the ground with 300 men and women to fully be immersed in the conflicts on the ground, neither in Ukraine, Russia, neither in Israel and Gaza and Palestine and Hamas, neither in Kashmir, neither in Taiwan. So, from the reports, I do an analysis of both news outlets from Quebec, Montreal, Canada, Canadian news outlets, United States news outlets, Israeli news outlets, and Indian news outlets, Chinese news outlets as much as I can because I spend sometimes I because of my Asperger's I do this hours and hours and hours a day. Sometimes I just don't realize that I spend 4 hours just looking at the news and doing geopolitical analysis and revision because there's events there's always constantly every hour there's geopolitical events, right? Because geopolitics is related to labor strikes, to statistics, to military developments, to new alliances, new treaties, tourism. Even all these are part of course, the geopolitical world. But the main parts of geopolitics is conflicts, wars, or alliances, or trade war. The trade war, of course, began by the United States. So what I have to say now, because this is relevant to us Canadians, is although I predicted in 2019, October 2019, that there's going to be an international conflagration, I did not predict the deterioration of relations with the United States. So this is new for me as well. I did not predict the re-election of Donald Trump. I would have voted for Biden Kamala, and since 2018, I got those red gloves credited by my anonymous friend, and right there in that backpack, by which I'm challenging Donald Trump, auctioning them for $1 million to give 50% to my anonymous friend and pay my $10,000 debt. But since 2018, it's a Dragon versus Trump event, as I'm calling for the building on the Canadian-U.S. border of a major, the biggest ever sports coliseum arena by joint Canada-United States on the Canadian-U.S. border to be 11 times bigger than the Caesar Superdome. Before it was, it's in Louisiana, New Orleans. Caesar Superdome was known as the Mercedes-Benz, and before that it was known as the Louisiana Arena. So it changed name several times, just like I changed name during COVID, but I still have to get that paper money. Money is to buy, sell. Of course, I still have to officially pay for my name change because I changed my name, but still officially have to change it officially on the paper. So it requires some financing with that. Anybody want a commission will, because nobody's born a dragon. You become one, not even myself, with the surname Dragon. Had to turn bloods. I had to thousands of push-ups, millions of marching steps, and blood, sweat, and tears to turn that A into an O. So that's the motto of the Dragon Army. Nobody's born a dragon, you become one. So we rock and roll with that. But on the Canadian-US border, I will to build together with you and to have the biggest ever sports complex ever built for sportists and perpetuities, for sports and fitness in perpetuity. And the first event is going to be inauguration, me fighting Donald Trump in a sportsmanlike boxing match on the Canadian West border. And we're going to build it 11 times bigger than the Coliseum Sports Arena and NFL Arena. Well, it's not just an NFL arena, but it's where many Super Bowls were fought and played and battled out, especially the Super Bowl 47. One of my favorite Super Bowls is Super Bowl 47, where the also has several nicknames. It's like I have several nicknames, and known as Super Bowl 47 has as a nickname Blackout Ball, Hardball Ball, Bro Ball, and my 49ers lost by 3 points, but it's still one of my favorite even though they lost. My Niners, please NFL, NHL, and BMLB reduce the cost of the tickets, and gotta give some of those tickets for those public workers as well, public workers. There's some tickets, and we're gonna do great things via my DRT Debt Refusion TV in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead, as we're gonna sign this year and maybe next year deadline by September 11th to do it ASAP, of course, as a symbolic gesture of fuse Canada, United States, and all levels, and mass finance healthcare and the rehabilitation of our brothers and sisters who, of course, have been incarcerated, imperial Criminal Rehabilitation Act, in order for us to build the 44 mass underground city tunnel structures, 44 mass tunnel structures with city-like subterranean cities, 44 subterranean cities, and it's going to be with many mass tunnels in case of a thermonuclear war. We need to start building that ASAP. 44 mass cities, tunnel-like structures we're going to build across North America in order to be able to continue the civilization in case of a nuclear war. So I did not predict that there's going to be that what's happening now between Canada and the United States. I did not predict, and I get goosebumps every time I discuss it, because since August 1st, 33 days now, that Canada, for the first time in the 21st century, were designated by the government of Trump and the Trump administration, as you can see per the White House declaration, we're designated as an unusual and extraordinary threat to the American people. Now, this is very unfortunately and very serious, because I was born in the United States 3 times, and I served in the United States Army, and I can say that this is serious. And I'm going to make a statement now that my brothers and sisters in the USA, on the left, on the right, in the center, in Canada, on the left, on the right, on the center, that you have to accord this following statement with a yes, 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 in the affirmative. You cannot negotiate, you cannot say no, and you cannot say maybe. When it comes to our foreign interest, I'm not discussing domestic affair, but on the number one priority when it comes to foreign affairs for both Canada and the United States, paradoxically, reciprocally, it is to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial, military, defense, security, sports, social, cultural relations with each other. So you cannot negotiate with that statement. It has to be so. It has to be affirmed with a yes, yes, yes. You cannot say no, no, no. So our main interest when it comes to geopolitical interest as a top priority is to have the best economic, social, financial relations with each other. That's just like the constant, the pie, not a edible pie, blackberry pie, blueberry pie, or red berry pie, or bacon pie, or cheese pie, or any edible pie. The pie, the symbol represent, which has to do with the ratio of the diameter and the circle, which is always 3.1460, and it's called the pie. It's like the N, the letter N for Normand, natural, neurodivergence, or neutral, or Normandy. It has two heads, two faces. That's why our coming empire, the fusion of Canada and the United States, of the fusion of the 63, will be an empire with two heads, two faces, and one benevolent and good and loving and kind, and one punishing in many ways. So we have that two heads, two faces in many ways. And just like the N, which represents the ratio with the circumference of the circle, it's an N with two heads. It has kind of, on one side it has one head and one face, on the other it has one face and one head. The N symbol, it's a pi. It's called the pi number. It's the relation between the circle and the diameter. The diameter and of the circle and the circumference of the circle. It's always a constant mathematical number, 3.1415 ad infinitum it continues. So what I said, geopolitically, it's a constant foreign affair. It has been so for decades, at least since the dissolution of this of the since the dissolution of the British Empire, because before, of course, the British Empire had more say to it and more power in Canada. But Even now, our Uncle Prime Minister, Uncle Carney, pledged allegiance to the King of England and his heirs. Can you imagine? Our leader, Canadian leader, Prime Minister Uncle Carney, pledged allegiance to the King of England and his heirs. That should have been gone a long time ago in the 90s. That, sh- that should have been gone a long time ago. Our Prime Minister pledged allegiance not to the people in the Constitution of Canada, but to the King of England and his heirs. That gotta go. It's time for the Republican, my way to fuse Canada, United States best. The King is absent, fellow Canadians. The King is absent. The King is absent. The King is absent. And of course, we have to realize, have to come to that realization, with all due respect, that this should have been done the turn of the millennium in 19 on the first day of the year 2000, January 1st, 2000. you know. Anyways, but nonetheless, our main interest as Canadians and my brothers and sisters, paradoxically from the United States, because although there's a border with Mexico, for the United States, you have the best is as when it comes to the constant, which I just mentioned, which is a parallel reflective of the same mathematical constant. If you make that parallel, that it's a constant, meaning it stays the same, it's not a variable, that is a constant for us Canadians and a constant for my brothers and sisters in the 50 states vis-a-vis Canada. That we must strive, our top number one priority for all our politicians on the left, on the right, in the center, center right, center left, on the right, on the left, or the center right, center left, or as a centrist, has to be as a priority when it comes to foreign affairs, that we must build the best economic, social, cordial relations with each other, not with any other country outside in the world. Those are secondary, tertiary, quadrant, and so on and so forth. Our main interest is to have the best relations with each other. Canada with the United States and the United States with Canada. And now we have this paradox with the Canada trade war, Canada United States trade war. And I'm alarmed and gives me goosebumps every time I discuss it, as I got Canada tatted up, that since August 1st, and this is serious, we're designated as an unusual and extraordinary threat to the American people by the Trump administration due to the fact that fentanyl has increased, crossing three times more fentanyl has entered 2025 than 2024, which could have potentially killed 16 million Americans, right? And the fact that now more and more I classify fentanyl not as a drug, but more as a bioweapon, because it doesn't make sense. So many people are dying. If you think about the drug trade, you would think that the person, the drug dealers, the drug traders would want the person, consumer, to keep on buying. But if they're dying, so many are dying. So I think that the tampering with it, it's kind of converting the fentanyl into a bioweapon. That's more and more every day, every week. I'm trying to, more and more, I'm classifying fentanyl as a bioweapon rather than, it doesn't make sense. Something doesn't add up. Because I don't do drugs myself. I'm with my Asperger's and my HFA Asperger's. I'm already, I guess, an ecstasy in a different manner. And I don't know if prior to 2014, if I was a junkie, maybe prior to 2014, I don't know. My memory kind of for 2014, spring, February 2014. Before that, I have trouble with memory. I survived a vicious surprise attack myself. I was attacked. I was hit in the head a few times and hit my head on the concrete. And I gotta retrieve the archives. I went to the Jewish General Hospital. I was put on some meds and I was bloodied up, bloodied up, bloodied up. I was bloodied up, but I survived. I got my scars, but that doesn't matter. What matters more is my work. And if you want to be friends with benefits, I'm craving a massage therapy session. That would be good. Maybe the Dragon Army. We're going to be for SSD, Security Service and Defense. And we're going to get something good going together as a mass public-private partnership. Canada, United States, I have hope. It's a Democratic Republican, Republican Democrat. 50-50. 50-50. So we must strive to have the best economic, social, security relations with each other. Now, with this new events and the justification for increasing tariffs on Canada has been that fentanyl has increased. The crossing into the United States from Canada. And we have to accord that the RCMP has warned us since at least 2015, for more than 10 years now, especially in the past 5 years, 4 years, during 3 years and a half during COVID. But around since 2015, the RCMP has sounded the alarm, as you can see from documents, that there's a growing transnational criminal syndicate transnational criminal organized groups establishing themselves in Canada. And you link this with potential my theory known as the D.M.A.A, the direct military action or assistance, which has a C in parentheses, potential consequences. And there are certain potential consequences of which can be the support by foreign powers, XYZ, ABCD, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever foreign powers, to finance and support these transnational criminal organized groups, transnational criminal syndicate organized groups in Canada and the United States. So there's the potential for that, due to, of course, in part of to the D.M.A.A or D.M.A or A, direct military assistance or action, which I discussed and I will get into a minute. I just want to finalize on the fact that this what's mentioned in the White House official dictum by the Trump administration and Trump, the justification for increasing the tariffs on August 1st, 2025, just 34 days ago, was due to this fact that also our law enforcement in Canada failed to coordinate. So coordinate means that we have to cooperate first, because cooperation can be sharing just information, not necessarily coordination. Coordination implies action. So to coordinate, coordination implies action. So to coordinate implies action, but not necessarily cooperate. Cooperate does not necessarily mean coordination, but when you coordinate, you have to cooperate because it's intermingled. But they're intermingled. Our law enforcement agencies fail to coordinate with the United States law enforcement agencies. That's why my way for the Imperial Police Secret for the Imperial Republic Police Force to be established by fusing the RCMP and FBI best, fusing the RCMP FBI best, and my way to fuse Canada and the United States best at this point in time where we are geopolitically. But we also have to finance mass healthcare, and we have to rebuild the ghettos. We have to rebuild the inner urban cities as well. We have to rebuild the inner urban cities and rehabilitate our population. A lot of our population needs help, needs support. Myself at the moment is just financial, monetary wise. But besides that, I'm joyous. I paid my rent here. And it's way better here where I live now than where I used to live. Way better where I used to live. And then I used to live in a very small underground moldy place. I didn't even have a bathtub. If even the even the kitchen was in my room. It was tiny, small, like a time. It was like a tight, small prison cell. I always say I served my time, but we need to salute those brothers and sisters who take their second chances and do their criminal rehabilitation, because we need to get the Imperial Criminal Rehabilitation Act, and that's all we need to do with that. So it's something which we need, of course, to do together in the implementation thereof in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. And the other point is, of course, the mention of the dictum in the White House official statements to the motive and the reason why on August 1st, 2025, 34 days ago, the tariffs on Canadian goods were increased. And the alarming wording is that now, since August 1st, 2025, Canada, we constitute, and this is serious, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the American people. And it's mentioned there of the growing super labs in Canada that can produce between 44 and 66 pounds of fentanyl I think it says every week, weekly or monthly, weekly, monthly. Got to double check, but that's a lot, right? In terms of, because it's so deadly and potent. And just last year, the RCMP, which is the equivalent of the FBI, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, on the 25th of October 2024, just last year, is going to be a year in about 44 days, almost 45 days. It's going to be the RCMP dismantled the biggest ever super lab in Canadian history just last year on the 25th of October. So you see the correlation, and this lab was run by a transnational criminal syndicate organization, transnational criminal syndicate organized group, transnational criminal syndicate organized group. So this super lab supposedly They seized money, they seized guns and weaponry, and it was potentially the doses of fentanyl that were being produced were about 95 million, which could have killed the population of Canada twice over. So if we're 42 million, we're getting close to 44, I believe, due to the immigration. I think we passed 44, right? Got to double check. But let's say 44 million, double that's 88 million, right? So the population of Canada twice over. So it's serious. And the RCMP in the papers have been warned us since about 2016 of the growing transnational criminal syndicate organized groups. So of course, all the situational awareness that this reality and the fact that just last year on the 25th of October 2024, the RCMP dismantled the biggest ever drug super lab in Canadian history. And there's mention there of growing super labs in Canada. And maybe this transnational criminal syndicate organized group, they had 5 labs. And maybe the RCMP just dismantled one, which is the biggest ever drug super lab, which produced so much fentanyl and the precursors and the sophistication of the processing methods that it could have killed the population of Canada twice in just that lab. So that's why I'm sounding the alarm. If just that one super lab could have killed the population of Canada twice over, I sound the alarm. Bioweapon, 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 bioweapon. Not a drug anymore. You follow? So we're in a crisis. We're in emergencies now. We're in a crisis, a big emergency. And so this fact that they are simply dismantled the biggest ever super lab. What if they had 5 super labs and this one was dismantled in BC, in Surrey, British Columbia? What if they had one of them was in the one that they dismantled was just 1 out of 5, and they have one in Quebec, one in Nova Scotia, one in Saskatchewan, and one in maybe Manitoba or in the Northwest Territories. Maybe there's 4 more to go, maybe. 4 more to go, 4 more to go, 4 more to go. Super labs. You follow? So it's serious, and it caused us a lot of economic, commercial, financial stress for many thousands are losing jobs because let's face it, 3/4, 75% of our goods are exported to the United States. The European Union, with their fiscal, economic, financial problems, the main economic engine of the European Union is Germany. Deutschland also has many problems now, many problems, and they're also losing jobs and cutting jobs. So they're not going to be able to absorb more than, I will say, 10%, 15 max, and that's in a few years, because just maybe this year they're gonna be able to take 5 or 10 maximum. No, not more than that. Till the end of the year, no, they're not gonna. When it's not real economics, because they're having their own problems. The European Union, they're not doing that economically, financially great, right? Not that much. We have the war in Ukraine, and it's my DRT best at this point in time, which can be expanded potentially to whole NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So the D.M.A.A now going to discuss the direct military assistance or action. So which could have potentially caused that these transnational criminal organized syndicate groups are supported by foreign powers and foreign actors. So what is the D.M.A.A? So D.M.A. or A is stands for D direct, M military, A action or assistance, or action or assistance can be interchanged. So it's not necessarily action, it can be assistance, right? So it relates to NATO, and of course the all the action or the assistance or the action that NATO provides to non-NATO member countries that's involved in conflicts. So NATO member countries or NATO as a group or as a collective military alliance, or individual nation states such as the USA, Canada, Germany, Poland, Romania, and 32 countries are part of NATO, right? Sweden is the newest one. So either the nations, states that are within NATO, one of the 32, or many together as a collective NATO alliance taking joint action, whether assistance or action directly. Action could be, of course, NATO planes bombing, such as in the Yugoslav wars and Libya and Syria, or ISIL and Iraq and Afghanistan, such matters. But consequently, It already relates to NATO taking direct military action or assistance, so it has nothing to do with humanitarian. So countries, if a country from NATO or NATO provides humanitarian assistance or food and sanitation pads or medicaments, stuff like that, that's not included in D.M.A.A. So direct has to be only military assistance or action. So it's a theory. It's not just a theory. It's a theory. It's a philosophy. It's a framework of reference, and it's a working framework for today and for the future, where we're heading if we are to continue to take D.M.A.A. or A in the future. So for example, in Ukraine is not part of NATO and was not part of NATO at the time of Russia's invasion and annexation of the four regions in the eastern Ukraine. They annexed four regions of the east. So about 1/5 of Ukraine has been annexed, but there are four different regions which merged into a Russian Federation. So we provided not action but assistance. So it could be either or assistance, because we assisted even Canada with military, with tanks and helmets and grenades and artillery and weaponry and munitions. So that's included in military, but it has potential consequences. So it's D.M.A.A, direct military assistance or action, or direct military action or assistance. And in parentheses is the C, the consequence, which could be that, for example, the Russian government covertly with secret police, current hacking, or with China together as jointly because of the Taiwan being providing assistance to Taiwan by providing military training and military weaponry or the such, can support transnational criminal syndicate organized groups in Canada, the US, or around in NATO. It could be even other measures, but this could be one of it. The consequences, that is, of the D.M.A.A. So the D.M.A.A. It's a working theory. It's a philosophy. It's a framework. It's a framework of reference. It's a strategy as well. Whether NATO we take action or assistance, and to potentially think of the consequences if we do, because it's all only related to non-NATO conflicts. So conflicts between nation states or regions which are not part of NATO, whether NATO countries as individual NATO countries or as a whole joint NATO members together to take action with the potential consequences. Because of course Article 5, if a NATO country is attacked, let's say Russia attacks what's close to, well, Moldova is not part of NATO, but Romania is the closest, right? Romania, and then Bulgaria and Poland. So if Russia attacks one of NATO countries, well, Poland, Romania, Sweden, then Article 5 has to be invoked. Or China attacks a country in NATO, then Article 5 binds it that NATO has to take collective joint action to help one of the 32 member states as a collective military alliance, right? But the D.M.A.A, direct military assistance or action or assistance, is not applicable to NATO's Article 5 here. We're discussing the D.M.A.A is only as in relation to NATO getting involved when conflicts occur between countries or regions that are not part of NATO in any way, shape, or form, that are not part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization members. So that's where the D.M.A enters in. For example, I'll give you an example. Venezuela, the United States and Venezuela are now taking some action and sending the ships and having, of course, took some action as in military action against Venezuela. Because the United States is part of NATO, that can be considered D.M.A.A, direct military assistance or action. In this case, it's action, right? It's action. Or let's say there's a war between Pakistan and India. Pakistan and India. If NATO member countries take D.M.A or A, so it can be direct military assistance or action. So assistance also falls under the category of providing munitions, technical support, providing training, providing weaponry, providing tanks, munitions, or financial assistance for military purposes, such as Canada we did vis-a-vis Ukraine. So you have to consider that this has nothing to do with humanitarian affairs here. Not It has to be military only, because military can harm the military of the other countries. So that has to be fully understood. And of course, whether we take D.M.A.A, it's always, my position is always as a Dragon Army public-private partnership initiative to transform NORAD, NATO to the Dragon Army Protocol formulations, the Imperial Republic's Army, first and foremost, for the 63, for to be only for SSD, Security Service and Defense, SSD, Security Service and Defense, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, 63, Canada, United States, and it can be expanded to NATO's SSD only. And whether we take DMA or A, that has to be only by, has to be always by voting and by referendum for the future. So it's a frame of reference, a frame of theoretical philosophy for the future collective, whether we take action. So it could be, for example, countries in Africa going to war, right? Sudan or Congo, or Sudan, or Ethiopia and Sudan going to war. If, for example, Ethiopia and Sudan going to war, whether we get involved as NATO member countries, that's DMAA, whether we assist or take action by bombing or boots on the ground, right? So this is DMAA, but it has the C to those four acronyms: direct military assistance or action or assistance, vice versa. DMAA has the C, potential consequences, which could be the fomenting of internal discord in NATO, or the trafficking of fentanyl for our citizens to die and be harmed and be poisoned by transnational criminal organized syndicates, groups which can be supported by foreign powers. And I guess since what we saw with the China militaries, which I'm going to discuss in the coming days by Sunday. It's the full moon, but what we saw with the China's massive military parade. No, I never seen a military parade. I watched the 1984, 1989, and 1978 Soviet military, and 19 I think 70 1963 military parade of something like that. I watched like four before 1989 of the Soviets, but it's interesting enough that this China's in Beijing yesterday was so massive. And but what's interestingly enough, as I want our some of my dragons are black, some of my dragons are white, some of my dragons are rainbow. That in the China's military parade, I didn't even see one black person. I didn't even see one black person. I did not even see one black person in the parade of China. It was all, I didn't even see one black person. Let me know if you did see. I didn't see even one black person. Which in my dragon army, I want to see black, white, or rainbow. As for the empire, we gotta roll that together.